get into it. Tonight, Ishtar and Tammuz. Last week we were in Egypt, ancient Egypt. You can just see the corner of right there. This is the Fertile Crescent. This is where we're going to be tonight, ancient Mesopotamia, around the same time. Now, I was in school for years and heard people talk about the Fertile Crescent, and I still couldn't picture it, so I didn't want to do that to you. I wanted you to see what it meant. So you can tell that this is a fertile area. It's surrounded by mountains. There's Iran, the Zagros Mountains, and you've got the Taurus Mountains over here in the Caucasus. And then you can see there's this massive drainage with the Euphrates on the west and the Tigris on the east. And it drains into the Persian Gulf down near Sumer. Sumer is very important. In fact, we think that the coast there, the drainage area, is actually 100 miles different from where it was in ancient Mesopotamia. So the silt just comes down and fills the Gulf, right? And that's an important part of the story tonight, believe it or not. It's an important part of the mythology. And you may remember last time there were implications in the myth of the Nile overflowing and Osiris being part of this vegetation cycle, which is dependent upon the Nile overflowing. Well, there's nothing here. There's just nothing here. So there's not ore, there's not fruit, there's just not much there, except these two rivers. And so the rivers become almost characters, not almost, they're really kind of characters in the story. So that's where we are tonight, in Sumer. This is the birth of culture. Egypt's the birth of culture too, but Western culture mostly comes from Sumeria and Mesopotamia, and you'll see why. So I have this little, this is really for you, Stephanie, this timeline. Watch this. Oh, look at that. So it gives you, I put it in there, I edited it, but it gives you a good sense of what's happening here. And we're going to mention some of these. There's the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, Ziggurats, where they appear. Hammurabi, which you may have heard of, lawgiver, king of Babylon. Look at 1792 to 1750 BCE, especially female deities in Mesopotamia decline in status during the reign of the Amorite king Hammurabi. And in the Code of Hammurabi there, 1000 BC, I put this in here just for a little biblical lesson. If you went to Sunday school, I don't know if any of you went to Sunday school, but I went to Sunday school. And if you read the Genesis story starting in chapter 12, it becomes the story of Abram, who becomes Abraham. And he is known as the man from Ur of the Chaldees. So if you ever want to know how biblical scholars work, it's pretty simple. If Abraham is from Ur of the Chaldees, then it has to be around 1000 BCE or later, right? It can't be before that because there are no Chaldees. And so you can date the book of Genesis no later than there. Right? So there are these little time and place stamps throughout the text. And actually, we're going to get into this in great detail when we talk about Eve and Adam, because just in those 3 chapters there are 2 stories, not one. But we'll get into that. And then, of course, you may know Nebuchadnezzar. He caused the fall of the southern kingdom of Israel. And it's he who took them into exile. And so we get Ezekiel with his great line, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept and remembered Zion. That's Nebuchadnezzar. And of course he falls, and then the Persian Empire comes in. This is all in the Hebrew Bible, a lot of this information and from that perspective. So tonight we're in Mesopotamia, we're in Sumer, in fact, which is the oldest of the civilizations of Mesopotamia. And so our couple tonight is called Inanna and Dumuzi there. It becomes an Akkadian culture with the rise of Sargon of Akkad. So the culture becomes Akkadian, and Ishtar becomes the name, with Tammuz as the male counterpart. Sargon actually is important to Ishtar because he employs her in a very deft and political way to become powerful. Inanna becomes the queen of heaven. And I find this really interesting. Good. Actually, I didn't know this until I did the research for this. This is the first, we get the first writer in the world from Mesopotamia in 2285, right around in here, to 2250. It is a woman. It's the first writer who's named in connection to the work, right? So there's lots of written stuff around, but no one who says, this is me, Enhe Duana, and this is my work. And it's a woman. She's a priestess of Ishtar, in fact. She is historical, we think. I mean, it's fuzzy at this time with the records we have, but there's pretty good evidence that she existed. She was in one of the urban centers. And of course, it doesn't hurt to be the daughter of Sargon of Akkad. So that's probably why we know her. There's actually an alabaster relief of her called the Disc of Enhe Duana, which is pretty cool. So what I want to do tonight is, there's just such a rich literature of Inanna or Ishtar. I just want you to hear some of the literature, and then we'll talk about what it means. So I'm going to read you a lot of the stories tonight, but I promise you they are not boring. They are, in fact, R-rated at times. So, yeah, excellent. Perfect. So, Inanna and the Hulupu tree. This is fascinating. So, it's a creation story, but it's a weird little creation story. Let me just read it to you. And you're going to meet a character that you've probably heard of, and we're going to meet again later tonight, and his name is Gilgamesh. All right, and I want you to remember the character of Gilgamesh in this story compared to the later story. Inanna called to her brother Gilgamesh, saying, "O Gilgamesh, in the days when the fates were decreed, when abundance overflowed in Sumer, when the sky god had taken the heavens," see, it's a creation story, when the sky god had taken the heavens and the air god the earth, when Ereshkigal was given the great below for her domain, the god of wisdom, Father Enki, remember that name, Father Enki, set sail for the underworld. Interesting, he set sail for the underworld, so he's going to go to the underworld, and the underworld rose up and attacked him. And at that time, just kind of skips over after that, so, okay. After that time, a single tree, a Hulupu tree. Oh, by the way, Brooke, I looked this up because I knew you were going to ask me. It's a willow tree. Okay, a white willow tree. It does, and the moon in some mythologies. So you've got to be careful if you're talking to this group, because they're scientists, they're everybody, and they will ask you questions. So I try to be on my toes. It is a willow. I don't believe that for a minute. The underworld rose up and attacked him, and at that time a single tree, a Hulupu tree, was planted on the banks of the Euphrates. The south wind pulled at its roots and ripped at its branches until the waters of the Euphrates carried it away. This is Inanna speaking, Ishtar. I plucked the tree from the river. I brought it to my holy garden. I tended the tree, waiting for my shining throne and bed. She wants to make a throne and bed out of this tree that was hurled onto the banks of the Euphrates because Enki transgressed into the underworld. Then a serpent who could not be charmed made its nest in the roots of the tree. I think somebody should just film this. This is just so imagistic. I love it. The serpent, who could not be charmed, made its nest in the roots of the tree. And the anzu bird set his young in the branches of the tree. And the dark-maid Lilith built her home in the trunk. Some of you know that name, I can see. I wept, how I wept. Yet they would not leave my tree. Gilgamesh, the valiant warrior Gilgamesh, the hero of Uruk, stood by Inanna. Gilgamesh fashioned his armor of 50 minas around his chest. That's like a pound, like a weight. 50 minas around his chest. The 50 minas weight as little to him as 50 feathers. This is how we speak of Gilgamesh. He lifted his bronze axe, the axe of the road, weighing 7 talents and 7 minas, to his shoulder. He entered Inanna's holy garden. Gilgamesh struck the serpent who could not be charmed. The anzu bird flew with his young to the mountains. And Lilith smashed her home and fled to the wild, uninhabited places. Somebody want to say where we meet Lilith again? Garden of Eden, and eventually she gets banished from there and is in the wild, uninhabited places. By the way, this is a contemporary piece by Jenny Carrington of this story, which I think is fantastic. Gilgamesh then loosed the roots of the hulupa tree, and the sons of the city who accompanied him cut off the branches. From the trunk of the tree, he carved a throne for his holy sister. And from the trunk of the tree, Gilgamesh carved a bed for Inanna. And from the roots of the tree, she fashioned a puku for her brother. Oh, I forgot to look that up. I think it's like a belt. From the crown of the tree, Inanna fashioned a miku for Gilgamesh, the hero of Uruk. Whoa, there are some loaded symbols in there, are there not? And there's probably some resonance for you because the Genesis story comes out of Mesopotamia. There is no doubt of this. They even use the same cognates of the language. So you have a bird and a snake and a wild woman in a tree. And you want to use this tree for your throne and your bed. What's that about? Well, I think it's about a lot. We're going to see as we move through the Ishtar stories. All right, here's the R-rated part. So this is a story about Inanna and Enki, the god of wisdom. I love all these Ishtar stories. Ishtar is so amazing. So remember that Ishtar Inanna with Gilgamesh, she needs Gilgamesh to clear the tree, the bird, the snake, and the woman. The snake who cannot be charmed, by the way. All right. And so now, she's going to take a trip to see Enki. Love this story. Inanna placed the shigura, the crown of the steppe, that's S-E-S-T-E-P-P-E, so the crown of the steppe on her head. She went to the sheepfold, to the shepherd. Remember this, sheepfold and shepherd. She leaned back against the apple tree. Tree? In a garden? What? When she leaned against the apple tree, her vulva was wondrous to behold. Rejoicing at her wondrous vulva, the young woman Inanna applauded herself. She said, Amanda, I, the Queen of Heaven, shall visit the God of wisdom. I shall go to Abzu, the sacred place in Eridu. I shall honor Enki. Oh yeah, you're going to honor him. The God of wisdom in Eridu. You can already tell what kind of character we're dealing with this. This is no Isis. This is no mother nurturing God. This is a badass, nasty woman. All right? Just watch. I shall utter a prayer to Enki at the deep, sweet waters. Oh, yeah, sure. And so with your great vulva that you're applauding, right? Now, again, we laugh at that, but there's also a very powerful symbolic element to it, right? It's the power of the feminine, basically. Inanna set out by herself. I actually love that line. Inanna set out by herself. What woman in history sets out by herself? I remember traveling once, and I was driving through Missouri, and I spied this little trail on the side of the road. I always took back roads. And I whipped around, and I parked in the woods, and I went down this trail, and I spent like a whole afternoon there. There was a creek at the bottom, and I got in the creek, and I just had a great afternoon. I got out, got back to my car, and I called my sister, and I said, I just had the most amazing day. I said, I just found that, I'm in rural Missouri, and I found this trail, and I just spent the whole afternoon. I kind of took my clothes off and got in the creek and, ran around, and it was great. And her response to that was, it's nice to be a man, isn't it? I said, yeah, you're right, it is. Because she said a woman could never consider, she could consider that, but she would have to consider it, right? To be running around by herself in the woods in a rural area where no one knew where she was. I'm like, yeah, you're right. But Inanna set out by herself. When Inanna enters the holy shrine, Enki says to his servant, give her butter cake to eat. Because we think he's seen her coming, right? Give her butter cake, pour cold water to refresh her heart, offer her beer before the statue of the lion, treat her like an equal. 4,000 years old, this text. Treat her like an equal. Greet Inanna at the holy table, the table of heaven, and his servant heeded Enki's words. And when Inanna entered the Absu, he gave her butter cake to eat. He poured cold water for her to drink. He offered her beer before the statue of the lion. He treated her respectfully. He greeted Inanna at the holy table, the table of heaven. Now, if you're of a linguistic bent or an anthropological bent, that may sound interesting to you. That's actually a chiasm and I don't want to get into this if it's too boring, but it's a way that you remembered how to tell stories. So you have a list, you go through the list, and then you repeat the list backwards, right? And so if you line up the items, they look like this, or a Greek chi. So it's a mnemonic device for cultures that don't have writing or even that do. Now it gets interesting. Enki and Inanna drank beer together. They drank more beer together. They drank more and more beer together. With their bronze vessels filled to overflowing with the vessels of Urash, mother of the earth, they toasted each other. They challenged each other. Enki, swaying with drink, toasted Inanna and said this, in the name of my power, in the name of my holy shrine, to my daughter Inanna, I give the high priesthood, godship, the noble, enduring crown, the throne of kingship. Inanna replied, I take them. And he goes on and on, the text goes on and on. I'm not going to give you this list again, but basically here's what it is. And this is kind of repeated to affirm, to make the contract between Enki and Inanna, that in fact she gets these things. Because she's gotten him drunk, and like some men who are drunk and powerful, they start making proclamations. And so he presents to Inanna lordship, godship, the crown, the throne, the exalted scepter, the exalted shrine, shepherdship, kingship, priestly offices, truth. He hands her the truth at one point. Descent into the netherworld and ascent from it, the standard, the flood, sexual intercourse and prostitution, the legal tongue and the libelous tongue, art and the holy cult chambers, The hero of heaven, music, eldership, heroship, and power, enmity, straightforwardness, the destruction of cities and lamentation, rejoicing of the heart, falsehood, the rebel land, goodness and justice, the craft of the carpenter, metal worker, scribe, smith, leather worker, mason, and basket weaver, wisdom and understanding, by the way, purification, fear and outcry, the kindling flame and the consuming fire, weariness, the shout of victory, counsel, the troubled heart, judgment and decision, exuberance, and let's not forget musical instruments. All right, you see what's happening here. He's given her culture. He's given her culture. She is now the queen of culture. The people will now get everything that makes them a people from this woman, Inanna, not the god of wisdom, Enki. Inanna and Tammuz are Ishtar and Tammuz. This is her brother Utu. The brother spoke to his younger sister. The sun god Utu spoke to Inanna. By the way, when you hear that kind of repetition, that's again orality. That's that repetition that has to occur for a story to be remembered. So it's not bad writing. It's not writing at all. Storytelling. He spoke to Inanna saying, "Young lady, the flax is in its fullness is lovely." Now don't miss this. The flax in its fullness is lovely. Inanna Ishtar is about the fecund earth. It's about the earth bringing forth. The flax in its fullness is lovely. Inanna, the grain is glistening in the furrow. I will hoe it for you. I will bring it to you. A piece of linen, big or small, is always needed. Inanna, I will bring it to you. Brother, after you've brought me the flax, who will comb it for me? Sister, I will bring it to you combed. This woman, she just manipulates these gods. It's almost embarrassing. Utu, after you've brought it to me combed, who will spin it for me? Inanna, I will bring it to you spun. Brother, after you've brought the flax to me spun, who will braid it for me? Sister, I'll bring it to you braided. Watch where she goes with this. Utu, after you brought it to me braided, who will warp it for me? Inanna, I will bring it to you warped. Brother, after you've brought the flax to me warped, who will weave it for me? Sister, I will bring it to you woven. Utu, after you've brought it to me woven, who will bleach it for me? Inanna, please, I will bring it to you bleached. Brother, after you've brought my bridal sheet to me, who will go to bed with me? Utu, who will go to bed with me? Sister, your bridegroom will go to bed with you. He who was born from a fertile womb, he who was conceived in the sacred marriage stone, Tammuz the shepherd, will go to bed with you. All right? Inanna spoke, "No, brother, the man of my heart works the hoe." That's H-O-E, Charlie, don't even. The farmer, he's the man of my heart. Now we're about to get into a very old war between farmers and shepherds that goes back this far. The farmer, he's the man of my heart. He gathers the grain into great heaps, right? So a fecund goddess, a goddess of agriculture, is going to be interested in a farmer, isn't she? Because he gathers the grain into great heaps. He brings the grain regularly into my storehouses. Utu spoke, "Sister, marry the shepherd. Why are you unwilling?" And you're going to think I'm making this up. I'm not. And you're going to, well, it means what you think it means. His cream is good. His milk is good. Whatever he touches shines brightly. Inanna married Tammuz. So we're trading in very erotic symbols here by design. This is not some Freudian reading. It's right there. There's no latent content here. It's all manifest. You who adorn yourself with the agate necklace of fertility, why are you unwilling? Dumuzi will share his rich cream with you. You who are meant to be the king's protector, why are you unwilling? Inanna spoke, the shepherd, I will not marry the shepherd. His clothes are coarse, his wool is rough. I will marry the farmer. The farmer grows flax for my clothes. The farmer grows barley for my table. Now, Dumuzi, who's apparently been here the whole time, right, listening to this, says, why do you speak about the farmer? Why do you speak about him? If he gives you black flour, I will give you black wool. If he gives you white flour, I will give you white wool. If he gives you beer, I will give you sweet milk. If he gives you bread, I will give you honey cheese. I will give the farmer my leftover cream. I will give the farmer my leftover milk. Why do you speak about the farmer? What does he have more than I do? Inanna spoke, shepherd, without my mother Ningal, you'd be driven away. Without my grandmother Ningikuga, you'd be driven into the steppes. Without my father Nana, you'd have no roof. Without my brother Utu, and Dumuzi interrupts her. Uh-oh. Inanna, do not start a quarrel. My father Inki is as good as your father Nana. My mother Sirtur is as good as your mother Ningal. My sister Geshtinana is as good as yours. Queen of the palace, let's talk this over. Oh, okay, he's going to use words. Inanna, let us sit and speak together. I'm as good as Utu. Enki is as good as Nana. Queen of the palace, let's talk this over. You know how this goes, right? When you're angry at each other, it's just a step away from something else. The word they had spoken was a word of desire. From the starting of the quarrel came the lover's desire. The shepherd went to the royal house with cream. Dumuzi went to the royal house with milk. Before the door, he called out, open the house, my lady, open the house. And again, there's no need for Freudian interpretation here. It's right there on the surface. Inanna ran to Ningal, the mother who bore her. Ningal counseled her daughter, saying, my child, the young man will be your father. My daughter, the young man will be your mother. In other words, he'll take care of you. He will treat you like a father. He will care for you like a mother. Open the house, my lady. Open the house. Inanna, at her mother's command, bathed and anointed herself with scented oil. She covered her body with the royal white robe. She readied her dowry. She arranged her precious lapis beads around her neck. She took her seal in her hand. And the next line is, Dumuzi waited expectantly. Inanna opened the door for him. Inside the house, she shone before him like the light of the moon. Dumuzi looked at her joyously. He pressed his neck close against hers. This text is 4,000 years old. Did I mention that? He kissed her. Inanna spoke. What I tell you, let the singer weave into song. What I tell you, let it flow from ear to mouth. Let it pass from old to young. My vulva, the horn, the boat of heaven, is full of eagerness like the young moon. My untilled land lies fallow. As for me, Inanna, who will plow my vulva? Who will plow my high field? Who will plow my wet ground? As for me, the young woman, who will plow my vulva? Who will station the ox there? Who will plow my vulva? So you see, they're just mixing the metaphors because it's one metaphor. It's sex and seeding the ground, right? Dumuzi replied, great lady, I will plow your vulva. Dumuzi the king will plow your vulva. Then plow my vulva, man of my heart, plow my vulva. I'm not making this up. At the king's lap stood the rising cedar. At the king's lap stood the rising cedar? Okay. Plants, and again, the metaphors are mixed. Plants grew high by their side. Grains grew high by their side. Gardens flourished luxuriantly. This is about that map, right? This is about the Tigris and Euphrates overflowing and the sediment, and it's also about sex. And then Inanna sings after the consummation. He has sprouted. He has burgeoned. His lettuce is planted by the water. He is the one my womb loves best. The shepherd, right? Remember, she didn't think much of shepherds before. My well-stocked garden of the plain, my barley growing high in its furrow. My apple tree, which bears fruit up to its crown. Oh, apple tree, remember? His lettuce is planted by the water. Okay, again, I am not making this up. My honey man sweetens. Okay, let me try it again. My honey man sweetens me always. Feel free to use that, anyone. It's not copyrighted. My Lord, the honey man of the gods. He is the one my womb loves best. His hand is honey, his foot is honey, he sweetens me always. My eager, impetuous caresser of the navel, my caresser of the soft thighs. He is the one my womb loves best. His lettuce is planted by my water. In battle, I am your leader. Really? You're supposed to be a passive woman receiving the seed. But this is not Isis, not that Isis was passive, but this is not your ordinary goddess. She's the goddess of love and war. In battle, I'm your leader. In combat, I am your armor bearer. In the assembly, I am your advocate. On the campaign, I am your inspiration. You, the chosen shepherd of the holy shrine. You, the king, the faithful provider of Uruk. You, the light of On's great shrine. And always you are fit to hold your head high on the lofty dais, to sit on the lapis lazuli throne, to cover your head with the holy crown. So you see what she's done here? She's elevated him through her power. This is exactly what Sargon would do, except metaphorically by invoking Ishtar as his patroness. To wear long clothes on your body, to bind yourself with the garments of kingship. So this is also it's about sex, it's about the harvest, and it's about political power or kingship. To carry the mace and the sword, to guide straight the long bow and arrow, to fasten the throw stick and sling at your side, to race on the road with the holy scepter in your hand and the holy sandals on your feet, to prance on the holy breast like a lapis lazuli calf. You, the sprinter, the chosen shepherd, in all my ways you are fit. May your heart enjoy long days. That which On has determined for you, may it not be altered. That which Enlil has granted, may it not be changed. You are the favorite of Ningal. Inanna holds you dear. Nice. That's some shepherd. Queen of Heaven just basically gave him almost everything the way Enki gave her culture. My beloved, the delight of my eyes, met me. We rejoiced together. He took his pleasure of me. He brought me into his house. He laid me down on the fragrant honey bed, my sweet love, lying by my heart, tongue playing. One by one, my fair Tammuz did so 50 times. I didn't make this up. 50 times. Now, says Inanna, my sweet love is sated. What does a man do in this situation? Now he says, what does he do, Amanda? Set me free. Set me free. You will be a little daughter to my father, Come, my beloved sister, I will go to the palace, but you set me free. Yeah. Sorry, on behalf of all men, I apologize for Tammuz. Hashtag what?
Not all Tammuz.
Not all Tammuz. Nice. All right. So, Tammuz takes the throne that Inanna has given him, and is not especially grateful. I mean, he's grateful for the sex, but that's over. Now he has the throne. Here now is the most famous text about Ishtar Inanna that we have. It's called the Descent of Inanna, because she goes to the underworld. So you remember in the Odyssey, the Iliad, the Aeneid, Dante, the hero has to go into the underworld. This is just required. This is the oldest version of that. Well, and in Egypt as well. This is the oldest version of that. I love this. Listen to this. I found this translation by a woman. I forgot her name. Anyway, I can look it up if you need it. Most of the texts say, from the great above, she descended to the great below. But this translation is very good. I like this. From the great above, she opened her ear to the great below. And this translator has a little passage on why she changed it to that. And she said the image here is of a donkey or a horse. You know how they turn their ears? She's like, that's what Inanna did to the great below. Now, keep in mind, this text is actually separate from the other text I just read, but then it's not, right? Because it's all part of the mythology, which is the collection of stories. So Tammuz asks to be set free, and he is set free and takes the throne. And then she opened her ear to the great below. From the great above, the goddess opened her ear to the great below. My lady abandoned heaven and earth to descend to the underworld. Inanna abandoned heaven and earth to descend to the underworld. She abandoned her office of holy priestess to descend to the underworld. She placed the shigura, the crown of the step, on her head, so she's getting dressed up here to go to the underworld. She arranged the dark locks of hair across her forehead. She tied the small lapis beads around her neck. She let the double strand of beads fall to her breast and wrapped the royal robe around her body. She daubed her eyes with ointment called, the ointment is called Let Him Come, Let Him Come. Maybe Maybelline needs to get on that. She bound the breastplate around her chest that read, Come, man, come. Slipped the gold ring over her wrist and took the lapis measuring rod and line in her hand. Inanna set out for the underworld. I love this character, right? I love this goddess. She set out for the underworld. She sets out for Enki to steal culture from him or to get him so drunk that he gives it away. Now she sets out for the underworld. Gatekeeper, ho! Open your gate, she says. Open the gate that I may enter. If you do not open the gate to let me enter, I will break the door. I will wrench the lock. I will smash the doorpost. I will force the doors. I will bring up the dead to eat the living, and the dead will outnumber the living. And that's how we got The Walking Dead. That is kind of referred to as the first zombie reference. I will bring up the dead to eat the living, and the dead will outnumber the living. Now, her sister is the queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal. When Ereshkigal heard this, she slapped her thigh and bit her lip. I think this means she's happy, but she also sees a moment, an opportunity. Well, the next line is, she took the matter into her heart and dwelt on it. Then she spoke. She tells the gatekeeper, "Let Inanna in, open each gate a crack, and as she enters, she must remove a piece of clothing." The servant bolted the 7 gates of the underworld. And he told Inanna to enter and to take off a piece of clothing with each gate. So, when she finally meets her sister, Ereshkigal, she is naked before her. We're going to come back to the symbolism of this, but you can probably already tell what's happening here, mythologically, psychologically. Naked and bowed low, Inanna entered the throne room. Ereshkigal rose from her throne, and Inanna started toward the throne. Then Anuna, the judges of the underworld, surrounded her, and they passed judgment against her, Inanna. Because you're not supposed to go to the underworld. The underworld doesn't like it. I mean, you kind of have to go to the underworld, but the underworld doesn't like it, and then that sets up the conflict of the story, and you know. Then Ereshkigal fastened on Inanna the eye of death. She spoke against her the word of wrath. She uttered against her the cry of guilt. She struck her. Her sister strikes her. How far she has fallen, Ishtar. Inanna was turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat, and was hung from a hook on the wall. And that's where the story ends. Except the story never ends. The ascent of Inanna. Her sisters and servants cry out to the gods as she had instructed them to. And Father Enlil answered angrily, "My daughter craved the great above, Inanna craved the great below. She who receives me of the underworld does not return. She who goes to the dark city stays there." Father Enlil will not help. She who goes to the dark city stays there. I can't help her. Then remember our old friend Enki, the god of wisdom, from whom Inanna, who she drank under the table and then got him to give her everything? From under his fingernail, Father Enki brought forth dirt. He fashioned the dirt into a kurgara, a creature neither male nor female. And from the fingernail of his other hand, he brought forth the dirt and fashioned it into a galatur, a creature neither male nor female. So he gave the food of life to the Kugara and the water of life to the Galatur. And Enki spoke to them both, saying, "Go to the underworld, enter the door like flies." Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, is moaning with the cries of a woman about to give birth. What? She's about to give birth? Yes, she is. Just stay Jungian on us. Stay symbolic on us. No linen is spread over her body. Her breasts are uncovered. Her hair swirls about her head like leeks when she cries, "Oh, oh, my inside. Oh, oh, your inside." The creatures are supposed to mimic what she says. And the queen will be pleased and offer you a gift. And at that point, you ask for the corpse that's hanging on the wall. This is a great story. I love this story. And then once you sprinkle the food of life on it, and the other one of you sprinkle the water of life on it, Inanna will rise. So they do that. They set for the underworld. They go through. They're like flies. They zip through the gates so they don't have to deal with the gatekeepers, the threshold guardians. They entered the throne room of the queen of the underworld. And then they do what they were told by Enki. They sprinkle water of life, the bread of life, and she rises. And she begins to ascend. And then the judges of the underworld, seized her. And they said, "Hey, no one goes back from the underworld unmarked." Right? No one goes back from the underworld unmarked. I see some marks out here. If Inanna wishes to return from the underworld, she must provide someone in her place. "Walk on to your city, Inanna," say the companions she has, we'll go with you to the big apple tree in Uruk. See, you thought that apple tree was just a prop. It's actually a symbol of tree of life. So in Uruk, by the big apple tree, sits Tammuz. She's just returned from hell. Tammuz, the husband of Inanna, was dressed in his shining garments. He sat on his magnificent throne. He did not move, the text says. I think that's meant to imply he's like a couch potato or something. Like maybe he's playing Nintendo or something, or Grand Theft Auto. So I skipped over this part, but some demons rise with her to help her out. They're called the Gala, and they grab him by his thighs. They poured the milk out of his 7 churns. Again, keeping in mind the symbolism. They broke the reed pipe, which the shepherd was playing. Inanna fastened on Tammuz the eye of death. She spoke against him the word of wrath. She uttered against him the cry of guilt. Take him, take Tammuz away. The Gala, who know no food and no drink, they seized him. They made him stand up. They made him sit down. They beat the husband of Inanna. They gashed him with axes. They said, take that crown off your head. Take the garment from your body. Let the royal scepter fall to the ground. Take off your holy sandals from your feet. Naked, you go with us. The Gala seized Tammuz. They surrounded him. They bound his hands. They bound his neck. This is so poetic. The churn was silent. No milk was poured. The cup was shattered. Tammuz was no more. The sheepfold was given to the winds. That's 4,000 years old, and it's fantastic. Now, what does Inanna do? She actually weeps. Gone is my husband, my sweet husband. Gone is my love, my sweet love. My beloved has been taken from the city. My beloved bridegroom has been taken from me before I could wrap him in a proper shroud. The wild bull lives no more. The shepherd, the wild bull lives no more. I ask the hills and valleys, where is my husband? And they do not answer. So there's a lot of poetry here. And then a fly appears. The holy fly circled the air above Inanna's head and spoke, if I tell you where Tammuz is, what will you give me? And Inanna said, if you will tell me, and this is a great offer, I will let you frequent the beer houses and taverns. What fly would not take that offer? I let you dwell among the talk of the wise ones. I let you dwell among the songs of the minstrels. The fly spoke, cool. That's the Akkadian translation. Cool. Lift your eyes to the edge of the steppe. Lift your eyes to a Raleigh. There you will find his brother. There you will find Tammuz. So they find him, and I'm going to skip some of this, but basically, yes, Inanna and Tammuz's sister. This is interesting because there are now 2 women brokering this deal on Tammuz. They found Tammuz weeping. Inanna took Tammuz by the hand and said, you will go to the underworld half the year. Your sister, since she has asked, will go the other half. Right? So you can't. All right, so what does that mean? You must stay in the underworld? That just means winter. Right? It's where nothing's growing, nothing's sprouting. That's the Persephone myth that you may know from Greece. The day you will be taken, your sister will call you. I love that. The sister goes half a year in his stead. Inanna placed Tammuz in the hands of the Eternal. And then she sings praise to her sister, Ereshkigal. Holy Ereshkigal, great is your renown. I sing your praises. Interesting. All right, let's move on. Ishtar and Gilgamesh, let's see. I don't want to get too much into this, but so let me just summarize it for you. So if you know this story, you know that Gilgamesh is a badass. He's the king of Uruk. And this story is clearly from later, but I mention it because I want you to see what happens to Ishtar. You've seen who she is now from these other texts, right? She's there at the creation. She's a brilliant drinker who drinks Enki under the table and gets culture for her people. She descends into the underworld. All this. Here's the last story we have about her. Gilgamesh is king of Uruk. He's a badass. He's friends with Enkidu, the wild man. And they go and kill the forest monster, Humbaba. They should not do this. This is not a good thing they should have done. But they do it because you get two guys together and something's going to die, always. And so they do. And they're coming back into Uruk and they're, prancing around. They have a parade. Everybody, all the girls are out, doing their praising of the men. Ishtar in heaven sees Gilgamesh and says, ooh. And basically comes on to Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh says, not after what you did to Tammuz. Right? And he embarrasses her terribly. Let me give you some of the sense. She says, marry me, be my husband, give me your luscious fruits. She's become so small now. And Gilgamesh says, your price is too high. What will happen to me when your heart turns elsewhere and your lust burns out? What? That's not part of her story, but it is now. Do you recognize this move? The powerful woman becomes the whore. The cheap whore, right? Why would I want to be the lover of a broken oven? I guess she's gotten older. Why would I want to be the lover of a broken oven that fails in the cold? This is remember Gilgamesh from the beginning? They were partners. He took care of that tree for her. Why would I want to be the lover of a broken oven that fails in the cold, a flimsy door that the wind blows through, a palace that falls on its staunchest defenders, a mouse that gnaws through? Okay, we get it. Wow. Which of your husbands did you love forever? There it is. There's the switch, right, that we now live with, right, in our perception of women. There it is. On and on he says. She calls her father to give her the bull of heaven to attack Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Gilgamesh and Enkidu slaughter the bull of heaven, and Enkidu takes one of its haunches and throws it at her. There it is. That's what happened to Ishtar, the great Inanna, who performs these amazing acts of sacrifice and eroticism and fecundity and power, is now getting a piece of meat thrown at her while she's being insulted. There it is. That's the moment. And from there, you can go straight to the book of Genesis. All right. What happens to the story? Like I said, the Sumerian version is Inanna and Tammuz. The Akkadian version is Ishtar and Tammuz. The Phoenician version is Astarte, and a variant of Astarte is Asherah, and that's in the Hebrew Bible. And there's this prohibition to the ancient Hebrews to not worship the trees of Asherah. She becomes Aphrodite in Greece. There's a relationship here to Adonis. It's interesting, the dying and rising god, Adonis, Osiris, Tammuz, right? And so, ritually, remember that myth is the script, ritual is the play. And so what happens is there were rituals connected to the worship of Ishtar and Tammuz, called sacred marriage. Now, it's unclear exactly what this means, meaning whether it's symbolic or not, but the ruler is, the king at the time is supposed to be associated with Tammuz, and he's supposed to have sexual relations are symbolic sexual relations with Ishtar, and the point is to make the land fecken and to bring forth grain, right? Accordingly, as I said, she favors kings in battle. There's this amazing weeping ceremony, and I'm closing up here. Amazing weeping ceremony that actually is we find in Egypt too, where I don't know if you remember last time we read a creation story where humans were created from tears. They were also created from semen, but this one was about tears. And so one of the rituals associated with this story is called the weeping ceremony. And it's where the women go to the river and they weep for the loss of Tammuz, right? It's the rain coming down. This is done at summer solstice. So it's the rain coming down to fertilize the fields, right? The weeping ceremony. Remember at the beginning, I said, as above, so below. Everything's going to connect here. It's connecting now. And I just find that I would love to see that, the weeping ceremony. And the idea is both to mourn. This is not affectation. This is not fake weeping. This is genuine mourning for loss. But then we lose every winter, don't we? We lose every winter and we get back from that mourning. It's mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, in the Hebrew Bible, the prophets. Ezekiel calls, and here's the turn into Judaism. Ezekiel calls what we've just been hearing idolatry, because there's so many animals involved, and he thinks that's worshiping animals. And so he says, you know, those people, they worship every form of creeping things, the snake who will not be charmed, an abominable beast. And then he says, to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was towards the north, behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. That's in the Bible, right? And so that ceremony was still going much later. Here's the prayer done during the ritual. Gods and men before the face of the gods are weeping for you at the same time when they behold me. All your sister goddesses are at your side and behind your couch, calling upon you, weeping. Live before us, desiring to behold you. All right. This is also probably, again, we're in the realm of probably here because we just don't know. It's probably the origin of Lent, is the weeping ceremony, because it was 40 days. So think about it. All right. Modern meanings. Ishtar is the goddess of sex. So one of the reasons I wanted you to hear the primary text is it's raw, it's erotic, it's unabashed. Why would it be? There's nothing to be ashamed of at this time, 4,000 years ago, in this culture. In fact, sex ultimately means life, because sex is equated to the planting of the seed and the birth of the grain. She's the goddess of war. So again, Isis is amazing. She'll take care of business when she has to. Ishtar wants to. She wants to get into it. She likes it. And we don't have any record of her having a daughter, really. I mean, there's what happens with a story like this, you get all kinds of variants, but she's not a mother. She's a warrior. And a sex goddess. Oh, I forgot about this. I love this. She actually gets in a fight with a mountain. Yeah, I love this. This is Ishtar. Mountain range, because of your elevation, because of your attractiveness, because of your beauty, because of you wearing a holy garment, I imagine that's a cloud, because of your reaching up to heaven, because you did not put your nose to the ground as I demanded, because you did not rub your lips in the dust, I have killed you and brought you low. That's Ishtar. She's associated with Venus, the morning and evening star, which is the star of transition, right? The morning and the evening star, the star of metamorphosis, right? She's associated with the moon, quite a bit. And I'm going to stop there because I've gone on long enough. But that is Ishtar, and she is amazing. And Tammuz is I. Thank you.